Hello, Shadowcat back, and I want to talk about something today. And it's something that's been brought back to my attention after something that happened in the news earlier this week. So, earlier this week, I saw a news story about a guy named General Flynn. Someone in the government, I don't know exactly who it is, and honestly, I don't even really care about who it is. I know it involves Trump somehow. That's really all I know. He was part of the cabinet, I think, or maybe Secretary of Defense. Like I said, doesn't matter. The person doesn't actually matter in the story because the story is actually what happened. What happened was this. He was part of the Trump campaign. He's been very outspoken. He's been doing his thing, as he does as a person in government, which, honestly, military, politician, whatever, when you're in government, you're all doing pretty much the same thing. Regardless of that, he's been doing his thing, and Chase, the big banking institution, decided that they had finally had enough, and they decided that due to his politics, due to his opinions, due to the things that he's been saying, they were going to cancel him. Which is to say, they were going to close all of his accounts, strike all of his credit cards, and simply just be done with him. Now, this has had a very predictable reaction, a very predictable response in the social and political spheres. Obviously, anyone who was on his side before immediately came out and decried this as being just bad for a variety of reasons, because this is something that is absolutely intolerable, honestly. And that's my opinion too, but I'll get to why exactly in a minute. And then, of course, on the other side, you had people that were praising this, cheering it on, saying, yes, deplatform all the Nazis, cancel all the Nazis, and right there is the subject of today's video. Today, I want to talk about cancel culture. This is something that you may have heard tossed around here and there. If you've been following politics and socioculturalism, then you might be more familiar with this than other people. If you've never followed any of this and you do your best to stay out of politics, then maybe you've only ever heard this in passing. But regardless of where you sit on this, even the people who are familiar with it seem to get something very, very wrong about it. And that's the reason why I want to talk about it today. See, there is no point in me coming out and saying, well, cancel culture is bad, and this is, what we have to do about it. There are 1,000 other videos out there that you can go watch that are going to say that. There is no point in me rehashing this. No, what I want to talk about is the thing that no one else is talking about. And that is, what is cancel culture? And for that, I need to start talking about words. Now, I have a video that I want to do on words entirely, on their meaning, their usage, their history, everything else. I started drafting that video and then realized that this is an absolutely massive subject, one that I am wholly just not qualified to even begin with. But I can begin here. See, if you read Orwell's 1984, which I highly recommend anyone and everyone should read, at one point in time this was required reading in most schools, for a reason. And it has since fallen out of fashion for reasons that I cannot comprehend. But one of the things that they cover in 1984 is the concept of newspeak. Basically, they have an entire department of government who goes through and shaves down all what they say are the unnecessary, superfluous words in the language. They serve no purpose except to confound, befuddle, and distract, and so they want to remove them. For example, in 1984, they say, we have a word good. We all know what the word good means. Why then do we need a word great? Well, why do we need the word great? We have good. If it's not great, why not just make it double good? After all, we already have double for other things. If I have 2 oranges and then I get 4 oranges, I have doubled the number of oranges I have. So if something is already good and it's even more good, well, now it's double good. We don't need great. We can get rid of that. Superb, excellent, all those words can go away because they can be double or triple good or quadruple good. And thus, they shave down the language and they control the words. Now, the reason for this is because in the book they state, if you can control words, you can control thoughts. After all, when you think about something, you do think about it in words. If you see a picture and you're mulling this picture over, how do you arrange your thoughts? You arrange it in words. Control the words, you can control thought. If you can control thought, you can control perception. And if you can control perception, you can control the world. It is one tool that can be used to control everything. What I want to get into here is cancel culture itself as a concept. Now, when we say cancel culture, here's our first mistake. We're using the word cancel culture. And I don't fault anyone for doing that. After all, it's the name you have been given, and if you're going to conceptualize this as a thought, you're going to need to be able to arrange this into words. What I want to do is push beyond that and get to the core of what it is beyond just a word, a name, a noun, all of those things. Several videos ago, I did one on civility. And I went back as to why is our society arranged the way it is? Why have we become significantly more peaceful than we were in the past? And why have things like dueling gone the way of the wayside? Just as a quick recap, and I'd love you to go back and see that video again on your own, but we used to decide that, everyone has honor, everyone has dignity, everyone should have respect. If you did not have that, and someone was to disrespect you, dishonor you, whatever, then you could demand satisfaction through violence. This would be essentially socially accepted violence. Instead of, just wanton murder where you would go out and say, I'm going to kill somebody today. No, you would say, look, you have dishonored me or you have disrespected me and I'm going to try and kill you. Whether it be pistols at dawn, swords in the street, whatever. It was, I'm going to kill you. This is the reason I'm going to kill you, and the rest of the community as my witness. This is how justice shall be done. Obviously, we have gotten away from that. I mean, it just doesn't exist. It does still kind of exist in some places, but it's very legally murky. The point is, we had these duels. We had dueling and we had murder like this. Well, not really murder because we were all agreeing to it. It's essentially just execution. And then we got away from it. But just because we got away from it does not mean that these concepts have gone away. It doesn't mean that the desire for these things has gone away. It simply means that we as a greater society have decided we're not going to do this anymore. And this is where I want to bring in cancel culture. See, when you look at the people who espouse cancel culture, they tend to be a rather identifiable group, and they tend to believe some very extreme things. They also tend to use some very extreme words. If you remember, what was it, a couple years ago? 4 years ago? Something like that? You used to have a lot of people who would run around and saying, it's okay to punch Nazis. Depending on who you're talking to, it's kind of hard to argue. I mean, we did spend an entire war punching Nazis and bayoneting them and shooting them and doing many different things to them. The problem is that when we did that, the Nazis were very identifiable. If you were wearing a Nazi uniform and you were shooting at Allied soldiers, you were pretty much fair game. Nowadays, a Nazi is whoever you decide to call a Nazi, and that was used as a justification to punch pretty much anyone you wanted to. Just make sure that you call them a Nazi first, and then it's A-okay to punch them. Yeah, it was a problem. Cancel culture is done basically by the same people as that. And it is done with pretty much the same reason as we used to have dueling. Allow me to explain. Cancel culture on its own is actually very simple. The idea is this. When someone does something that you find disagreeable, instead of going to them directly, what you do is you get together with a whole bunch of other people, which at one point in time we would call this a lynch mob, but I'm getting ahead of myself. And then rather than going after the person, you go after their support network. Instead of calling or harassing the person who has offended you, you go after their job. You go after their employer and you harass their employer. You say, this person has said these things. These things are objectionable, and you need to fire this person immediately. Now, in general, this kind of thing would end up with a phone being hung up very roughly and just, don't ever call this number again. But we have decided, or learned rather, that we can actually threaten things like boycotts or protests or strikes or whatever to hurt the business if they don't do what you want. Cancel culture is violence kind of redirected. So you call up someone's employer and then you tell them that if they don't get rid of this person who has offended you, then you will do whatever you can to hurt their business in a peaceful way as much as you can until they comply. And if this sounds like terrorism to you, well, it kind of is. It's a softer kind, but it still kind of is. So the end result, of course, is the business has to make a choice. Do I take the hit on the chin and retain this employee that people that I don't even know want gone, or do I simply take the easy route to save my business and get rid of this one person? The sacrificial lamb, as it were. Which has tended to be the case. I mean, if you're being threatened with your very livelihood, then you'll get rid of the person who is, the cause of the problem. Of course, in the process of doing so, you're taking away that person's livelihood. And that right there is the essence of cancel culture. Take, for example, if the person happens to live in a homeowners association, which, by the way, if you ever have the chance to live in a homeowners association, don't. They are one step up from the mafia. But that's not the subject of this video. No, what is if they happen to live in one of these, instead of going to their employer, you can go to the HOA. You can say that this person is a bad person, and they're espousing these beliefs, and if they are not evicted from this housing settlement, then you're going to simply come down and protest and make an ass of yourself until such time as this person is removed. And the homeowners association may say, well, you can't do that, this is a private community. But as we've seen in previous years, private community doesn't really mean anything when you have 500 people who want to trample over a gate. So the HOA has a choice to make. Do we evict this person and just simply find a reason to do so? Or do we risk them coming through and disrupting everything? Generally speaking, they will find a reason, and then they will just start the eviction trend or proceedings, and there you go. This can be done for school as well. It can be done for groups, clubs, whatever. The idea of cancel culture is thus this. Instead of going straight after someone and saying, I will kill you because you have dishonored me, disrespected me, offended me in some way, instead of demanding immediate, direct satisfaction, we will settle for indirect, delayed satisfaction. Because whether it is a bullet or whether it is starvation, the end result is the same. You have managed to eliminate someone who you don't like. This is dueling for the new century. Instead of having our conflicts out in the street, we've decided that we're going to simply remove you from the street and from everything else. No more job means no more money. So if they can take away your job, you can't feed yourself, you can't pay bills, maybe you're renting, maybe you're paying a mortgage, whatever. They take away your job, and now you no longer can even afford to be housed. If someone has espoused an opinion that you don't like say they came out and they were pro-abortion and you're anti-abortion, or wait, no, I think I had that backwards. Maybe if you're anti-abortion, you're pro-abortion, and you want this person out because this person is threatening the rights of women everywhere. Well, if you can get rid of their job, they have much bigger things to worry about. Rather than espousing the opinions you don't like, they're going to be busy trying to find another job. Or if you've made them homeless, well, then they have much bigger things to worry about because they now have to find shelter. And if they happen to starve in the process, then not only have you silenced them temporarily, you've silenced them permanently. This, again, is the essence of cancel culture. It is a way of destroying your opponent utterly and completely without having to fire a shot. Now, this could be seen as more civilized. However, it's simply a roundabout way to get back to the same thing we were doing before. And this does tend to go both ways, but it's heavily slanted in one way. The fact is that anyone who sees something objectionable can simply demand a mob come up, cancel this person through whatever means necessary, and we're done. Now, the reason I mentioned a lynch mob earlier is because, well, that's basically what this is. During the time when lynch mobs were a thing, which they're not anymore, and that's a good, what would happen is you would have someone who would do something objectionable. They would say something, do something, touch someone, break something, whatever, and justice would be met out on the spot. You would get a posse up of people, you get some rope, you get a horse or a truck or something like that, and you would just deal with it then. The same thing is true with cancel culture. There is no legal process for this. There is no hesitancy, no discussion, no negotiation, no compromise. As soon as someone does something you don't like, you gather up as many people as you can, and you go straight for their most vulnerable points. You go for their job. You go for their schools. You go, and by the way, schools may not necessarily mean college, because we've seen before, these people will go after their children's schools, or sometimes after their children themselves. Either way you do it, the result is still the same. You are meting out the most mild form of violence you can against them with the intention to destroy their lives. This is the thing that no one seems to be talking about. Or not no one, but very, very few people. Most people say cancel culture exists. What can we do about it? And while that is a very, very useful thing, and it is something that we should be discussing in general, if we do not understand the thing, then we cannot deal with the thing. You have to understand the concept before you can change the concept, and that's where words come in. I have heard some people call it a digital death sentence, usually in response to censorship, because if you're censored on a platform somewhere, yeah, that's a digital death sentence. You have been digitally killed. But the same can be true for cancellation, whether it's done over the phone, whether it's done by email, or even sometimes if you're just using social media to gather the people you need to go stage an in-person protest. You're using the digital means to enact someone's removal from society. And what is an execution if not the removal of someone from society? This is the heart and the danger of cancel culture. And this is what I need everyone to understand. Cancel culture on its own is a tool. It is a method of taking the people whom you deem to be undesirable and without jury, judge, trial, remove them from society. And you're forcing people to do so basically of their own volition, coerced as it is. I don't really have much more to say on this one because I think that is the essence of everything I wanted to say. And if I just continue, I'm going to repeat the same concepts over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I want to end this here. But I want you to keep these thoughts in mind, because going forward, we're just going to see more and more of this. I think it was actually kind of going down for a while. There was a lull there, I think, of a couple of months where I didn't hear a lot about it, and then suddenly it just came back into the limelight. But we've seen this before with not just this General Flynn person. We've seen this with big businesses like Disney and Netflix. We've seen this with students on campuses, whether it be high school or college. Cancel culture is rife. And it is just the reincarnation of old dueling cultures and old lynch cultures that have come back, rebranded, repainted for a new and only slightly more civilized age. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take a break here. Like I said, take some time, think about that, meditate on that a little bit. Now that you have a new lens that you can start looking at these things through, pay attention to the news. Look at what's going on. Whenever they say someone is fired for having these beliefs, whether they're fired for being, anti-abortion, fired for being anti-vaccine or anti-mask, fired for whatever opinion they're holding, now you have a lens from which to look at that and say, not only do I see what's happening, but now I can better understand why it's happening, who's doing it, and ultimately what the end goal was from the beginning. And the end goal, of course, was their removal from society. The grander end goal is the modification of that society. Because if you can cancel enough people, the rest will fall in line. Or so the people in charge want you to think. In reality, they can't cancel everyone because once they have, then they're outnumbered. Of course, by that logic, they're already outnumbered and they just don't know it. But thank you for listening to this. Thank you for considering this. If you've enjoyed this at all, make sure to subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell because the button does nothing but unlock the bell. If you know somebody else who might find this interesting, make sure to share this with them. And even if you don't share it with them, make sure you leave a like, leave a comment down below, and I will see you next time. Till then, take care.